Hello and welcome to the Winning at TestRail reporting webinar with GURUC's own lead support engineer, Marco Garcia, and myself, Simon Knight. During the webinar, we're going to be talking about all things related to TestRail reporting. We're going to be covering off things like dashboards, report configuration, some common misconceptions about how some of our reports work. And we're going to run through all of our built-in reports and how, if you're a server customer, you can go about creating your own customized reports. After we've done all that, we hope to have some time for questions and answers and to give you guys an opportunity to address any specific issues you might have relating to TestRail reporting. I should just mention, though, that we're expecting to cover off quite a lot of material in this webinar, so we may be a little bit pressed for time. And if we're not able to answer all of the questions that we'd like to do, then we will follow up the webinar with a kind of FAQ blog post, so we can try to make sure we cover as many of those things off after the webinar. We'll also be posting the webinar as a blog post on our website after we've had some time to process it after the webinar has taken place. So I'm Simon Knight. I'm the TestRail product manager. If you've got any issues, questions, suggestions about how we can improve your TestRail product experience, you know who to reach out to. Before I became the product manager, I spent 10 years or so working mainly as an independent software testing consultant, working with teams of all shapes, sizes, and geographies to help them deliver better software faster and with less bugs. I also spent some time working with the testing community, hosting conferences and delivering training and stuff like that. If you want to stay in touch, there's some links. You can follow me on those or on the GURUC blog. Also with us today, we have Marco Garcia. Marco has been with GURUC for a couple of years now. And prior to joining us, he worked with Atlassian as a cloud support engineer. From talking to Marco prior to the webinar, the one thing that you should know about Marco is he doesn't like to talk about himself very much, so we're just gonna get straight into the webinar, and Marco's gonna take you through TestRail reporting. So Marco, over to you. Oh, that's not the slide we want.
Awesome.
Sorry, I need to transfer to you. Bear with me.
Yeah, you could just pass me presenter.
Yeah, there you go. Over to you, Marco. I was expecting another slide there.
All right, should be showing my screen now. Everyone, this is Marco. We have a lot of content to cover, so I just kind of want to get right into it. TestRail has a wide variety of reporting options, including both real-time statistics and dashboards that you can see throughout TestRail just navigating through it, as well as configurable custom reporting that allow you to get more granular with your options and your configurations. Here, I'm in a demo instance now with some demo data that we just generated today. So you'll see this is the primary homepage for a TestRail instance once you get logged in. And you'll see the main dashboard here has some activity statistics basically to show you the number of tests that have been executed for the top projects or the most recent projects in your TestRail instance. So here we just have one project and you'll see one line. If we had multiple projects, you would see multiple lines here with different color codes and a list here of the different projects. This graph, and almost any graph that looks like this in this sort of section, has a time frame that can be chosen. So here you can choose 14 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. These are just some preset options that you can choose in case you want to see activity over a longer period of time or a shorter period of time. The sample data that we have mainly just covers 2 weeks worth of data, so we'll keep that to 14 days, but this is customizable and you can see this here. Another item I wanted to point out on this project dashboard is that you do have the ability, when using the detailed view, to expand this and see some very basic statistics here. These are just status statistics, and if you hover over, you get some details based on the numbers of tests that have been marked for any specific status. You also get to see the pass percentage here as well. So these are just going to show a small number of test runs within the project and not the full list. So that's something that you can leverage if you just want to get a quick summary on some of the recent activity that's been done in each project. Now, getting into a project, you'll have a similar sort of graph here that also shows some activity. It's going to also provide some status statistics as well. So this is broken down a little bit more specific to this project, and you'll see just the number of tests that have been passed or blocked, failed, retest, depending on your statuses, broken down here via different lines throughout. And this is just, again, another summary based on recent activity. This can also be changed in terms of time frame. And this is just preliminary summary of the current project. So it's not going to dive deep into any specific entity. And it's not too customizable here, aside from the time frame. So this is just a project overview dashboard. And you also see various activity, recent changes to the project, and have the ability to access different recent entities like milestones and test runs and plans that have been created. So whenever you get into any specific entity, for example, we'll go to a test run here on our test runs and results tab. You'll have similar statistics that we saw when we expanded the project from the main dashboard. Here, just really quickly, you can hover over these to see some of the numbers, but you can also click directly onto any entity, and you'll see dashboards for various different statistics. Here, you'll see status statistics. So you'll see a pie chart here, and again, you can hover over these to get some more tooltip on the details of each section. But you'll see the different statuses that you have. If you added more custom statuses, you would also see these here. And you'll see the numbers as well as the total number that are still untested down here in underneath the pass percentage. So the majority of the percentage, I guess the main percentage that people want to see is the pass percentage. And that's what this status statistics graph highlights. So you can also quickly move down and go through to see the statuses here on the right for each individual test. One thing that I wanted to point out here is that not many users use or can see is that there's also this little bar graph here on each individual section. So here this prerequisite section has it, and if you hover over that, this also has some details and statistics for the statuses that have been set specifically for this section. So if you wanted to get these details just for a single section, this is a really quick way you can do that via these little bar graphs next to each section title. So you just scroll down and go through these and get some preliminary status statistics for each section. Here on the right, when looking at a test run, you'll see the activity, progress, and defects tabs. These also provide real-time statistics and data for your entity. These will be available on test runs, test plans, and milestones. So you'll be able to see these options and this data on almost any entity in TestRail. And I'll just show you each tab individually. We have the activity tab. Now, I just generated all this data today, so you won't see all of the data over time, but if you had more data over time for your test run, you would see that spread out throughout the graph. And the activity tab just it shows mainly the number of tests that have been executed and breaks it down in this line graph via statuses. So this is similar to the overview tab that you saw for this project, and it's going to give you these. It's also going to give you the activity for each test, any activity that has been added to this test run, and that can be things like setting a status, like marking something as passed or failed or blocked, but it can also be things like assigning a test to a tester, or adding a comment to a test that doesn't contain any results, those sort of activities. So you'll be able to see these. These are paginated here, so you can cycle through older ones if you need to. But this is just to give you a very quick look at the activity, the recent activity that has been added to this test run or performed on this test run. The progress tab, this is mainly used to show progress and estimates and forecasts on when you might be able to complete your test run. Currently, again, this was all generated in one day, so the graph isn't going to look as nice as it would on an actual test run that has been run over time. But you'll see a burn down chart here, which kind of gives you a little example of when this might be completed. You can also see we have numbers here for the number of tests we have remaining, so you'll be able to see those, the remaining effort. This is based on TestRail's forecasting, which I'll explain here in a second, and then the ideal progress that we want to hit. So here you'll see, again, just because this was generated all at one time with our example project data, currently it says forecast not possible, more data needed. And this will vary. There's 3 different statuses for forecasts that you'll see throughout TestRail. This can be on both the live statistics such as this, or also on reports that can be generated manually. And the 3 different forecast statuses are: the forecast is not possible. So this is what we see now, and this is mainly because the data was all generated at one time, so that's why we don't see the data. You have low accuracy. This just means that you don't have enough data, or TestRail doesn't have enough data to actually generate an accurate forecast. So it kind of lets you know. It will provide us a forecast here, but it will just let you know that this isn't going to be very accurate. And as you add more data over time to TestRail, it's going to be able to calculate more accurate forecasts and let you know what these are. So the TestRail's forecasting engine uses both the estimate. This is the estimated time that you've entered whenever you're creating and planning your test cases. There's an estimate field, and you can essentially enter how long you think this is going to take to run. But it also uses the actual time that it took to test these. So if I have multiple test runs over time with the same test case included, if you enter the actual test or time it took to do each test, then this will be remembered by TestRail and used when calculating the forecast in the future. The next time you add this test case to a test run, it knew that you took this amount of time to do it, and so this is the amount of time it's going to forecast that it's going to take you to do it the next time as well. So the forecasting engine uses those 2 fields, the estimate that you've entered on the test case level and the elapsed time that you've entered when executing tests. And it'll generate that forecast and let you know whether this is going to be an accurate forecast or not. So this progress section is designed to show you that. You can see here down below to show you the percentage of tests that you've completed so far. This will be based on the statuses that you've marked as final statuses. So these will be usually passed, and sometimes, depending on how your team likes to mark these statuses, you can customize those to determine which ones are considered complete for the purpose of your completion percentage. It's going to show you the amount of time that has elapsed so far based on the elapsed time field. So this is the number that you've entered whenever you are submitting your test results. And it's just going to show you the tests per day and the hours per day. This is going to be, again, this data is sample data, so it's not going to show very detailed numbers, but it's just to show you an example of what this could look like. Here you'll have the metrics, the completed percentage, the to-do, so this is what we have left to do, and then of course the total. This is using the estimate field. These are, again, everything that I've entered when planning my test cases, and the estimate field, what I assume that this test is going to take to complete. Forecast whenever you've added more elapsed times that throughout the history, even across multiple test runs, this is going to give you that forecast here. So that's what the progress tab is mainly used for. The defects tab, this is going to show you the defects that have been submitted for this specific test run or this specific entity. So if I was on a milestone, you would have the same tab and you'd be able to see the full list of defects here. Now these, if you have your TestRail instance integrated with a third-party defect tracker tool, for example, JIRA, I have this instance connected to a sample JIRA instance. This will query your defect tracker in real time to give you the current statuses that you have set for each one of these defects on your issue tracker. So here, this is pulling this data directly from JIRA and letting my team know, okay, these are still to do or in progress. This is the only defect that has been completed. So maybe I can go back and retest this if I needed to retest this after the defect has been fixed, for example. So this is a good way to see an overall overview of all the defects that you've added to your test run and which tests they're associated with. Again, it uses all the defect plugin features. So if I hover over this, it's going to query my JIRA instance in real time. And it's going to display the current details that I have for this issue in JIRA. And I can also click on this link and it's going to take me directly to my JIRA instance in a new tab. So this is my JIRA instance, and it's going to, you'll see that this status and all these details were queried in real time here on this page. So you'll notice that a lot of these tabs will be, these sections will be generated in reports as well. And I'll show you those here in a second. But a lot of this is, these terms are going to be used throughout the reporting features in TestRail. And just to show you, that was a test run that we looked at. This here is a test plan. So you'll see there's multiple test runs in this test plan. Here I'll have the overall status statistics for the entire test plan. So that's the aggregated statistics for all of these test runs. And it's the same whenever you navigate through your activity, progress, and defects tabs. Now, if I get back to this, I can also drill into each test run within this test plan to see the statistics for this specific test run in the plan, in case I don't want to see the overall statistics for the entire plan. So these same areas, these same tabs are visible throughout any entity in TestRail. And navigating to our milestones, it's the same concept. I'm going to click on this release 1.0 milestone. You'll see all of the test plans and test runs that are linked to this milestone. And you'll see the status statistics and also the same tabs here on the right for activity, progress, and defects. So these are the real-time dashboards. These are always updated in real time as results have been added and as test runs and new test runs and data have been added to the instance or to the project. And it's always going to include all of the data for that entity. So it can't be limited, it can't be changed or configured in any way as far as these dashboards are concerned. Aside from these dashboard reportings or reports, we also have reports that are very similar but can be generated and can be configured to be much more either robust or limited depending on the exact report that you need. These will all be visible and available under the Reports tab of any project. You'll see here, I just want to give you an overview of the reports tab. You'll have any reports that are shared for the entire team, any reports that I've generated as private that only I want to look at, and then any reports that I've scheduled to be run, for example, daily, or maybe I need a weekly report. You can schedule these and these will be visible here. The actual generated reports from any scheduled report will show up in the private or shared section, depending on if you've configured them as private or shared, but you'll see the configuration of the report down here. And you can always edit these or copy them, delete them as necessary. Here on the right, if you already have reports generated, you have the option to share this report via email. This will allow you to either email a link to the report. So let's just say I want the people on my instance to be able to see this, this specific report. Maybe it's been generated and they haven't looked at it yet. So I can configure this to email just the link, and they'll get an email, allow them to click on it and log into the instance. You can also email these to people that don't have access to TestRail. We have two different options, HTML and also PDF. The PDF option is actually a really new feature. We've had tons of requests to have this added, and we were excited to get this added. It was one of the bigger pain points once a lot of the mail providers started blocking HTML attachments or JavaScript attachments. And so providing this PDF option allows you to send it to anybody without any block going on from your mail provider. So the HTML attachment will include the full HTML version of the report, and this is going to be basically exactly how it looks and feels whenever you're looking at the report within TestRail. This includes the JavaScript that's used to generate the specific features, for example, hovering over any specific status or statistic, and those kinds of interactions that you would see throughout the report. And because of this, because of those files, the JavaScript and the way TestRail zips these attachments up, that's why in some cases a mail provider would block these. And this is something new. For example, Google Apps recently started blocking HTML attachments like this. The PDF attachment, it just comes as a direct PDF. There's a caveat in that if a report is, for example, very, very wide, it's not going to look very great in PDF format. But for the majority of your reports, it'll look just fine, and it'll look almost as if it does in the app. It's just not interactive. So you can email these as needed, and since you're emailing the actual report in a file, the users that these are going to don't have to be TestRail users. And so you could just specify any email address, even if they're not a user. Aside from sharing, you also have the option to create and copy a similar report. So let's just say I want to run this exact report again. I can drill into it and create and copy. You can customize the details slightly if you need to, but you can also just add the report again, and it's going to create the reports with the exact same setting that you had for this one. This is useful whenever you have something, for example, that is like a scheduled report, but it doesn't need to be on a specific time frame. It's just going to be used whenever you need it, so you can very quickly copy a report, an existing report, to do that. And then you can also just delete reports. Now keep in mind, some of these options here are going to be limited based on your permissions for reports. So that's up to your administrator. Administrators can go through the administration area and check the users and roles permissions to enable viewing or deleting reports for any project. So here I have full permissions and I can see all the options. Aside from these features here on the reports tab, you'll have the full list of reports here on the right. Now we won't have time to go through every report within this webinar, but I'm going to try to go through some of the more popular reports. And what I mainly want to get out of this webinar is to show you, I guess, give you the power to know how to best customize any report with the features that we provide for these reports, so that you can take that knowledge and apply it to any one of these reports, or even any custom report that you might build in the future.
Just to let you know, Marco, you got about 30 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. All right, so here, if you hover over any report, you'll see a small tooltip that gives you a brief summary of what this report does. And so you can hover over any of these just to get a brief summary. It's always my recommendation to go through and just start generating sample reports with the data that you have currently in your instance. Let's say you run a test run as an example, and you want to see what TestRail reporting can do with that. I just recommend going through and generating these and playing around with the settings in order to see exactly what gets generated. And then as you get more practice generating these, and hopefully with the information that I'm about to provide, you'll be able to really drill down and configure the exact reports that you need. I'm going to go through, so I already have some pre-generated here, but what I want to do is go through these and show you some of the options that I could have used, as well as how these look once they're generated. So I'll go through this run summary report. This is a popular one. You want to know the summary of your test runs. The summary reports are all going to be very similar to each other. They're just going to be for different entities. So if you want just a summary of your test runs, you would use this one. If you want a summary of your overall test plan, you would use the plan summary, and same goes for milestone. The project summary report is more to show history and activity over time for a project. And so this can be obviously quite large depending on the size of your project. But most teams, I'd say, will use the milestone runs and plan summary reports most often. I'm going to get into the run summary report now. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create or schedule a similar report so that you can see the exact options that I chose for this report. Now, I just essentially use the default options here, but I'm going to go through and show you some of the different things that you can do with these. So for example, here you have, again, a quick summary on what this type of report does. You'll also be able to see the name. So this is going to be run summary, and it's going to automatically use today's date if I choose this option, or you can also change the name if you need to. Whenever you're scheduling reports, sometimes it's beneficial to change the names for these in case you want them to be for a specific use case. For example, you can provide a description as well. This will be added to the top of the report whenever you've generated it. But what I really want to get to here is the report options that you have available. So each report is going to have a set of tabs in the report options that can be used to configure various different sections of the report. I'm going to go through just this first section so you can see what it looks like and the options that I have. And keep in mind, a lot of these reports have very similar features that can be used for this. So basically what I want to get through is that don't pay attention to the very specific entries that I have here, but instead the features that can be used to customize your own to your use case. So here I can include the test results. So by default, I included all the test runs on this project. But if I didn't want to do that, I could select the test runs that match any specific filter. So you click on this change option, and it allows you to change the specific attributes for any specific set of test runs. And so, for example, if I just want to see the ones that have been completed on a specific day or from a specific time frame, you could do that. If you ever wanted to customize a time frame, you just click this, and it gives you a date picker here to choose, I want to see everything that was completed last week, for example, or everything that was completed last month. And this is all I want to include in this specific report. But let's say I wanted to do that and also show just the ones that I've done in that specific time frame. So you can really get granular with the test runs you want to include in any report. And this is how you would do that if you wanted to. And let's just say I don't have a filter for any specific set of test runs, and I just want to specify these manually. I'm going to add some test runs here manually and just check the ones that I want to include. So this is good. A lot of the times we see teams want to know, for example, let's say we have multiple test plans. So for example, if you look at all of these that have a browser identified, these belong to a test plan. And let's say I had multiple test plans similar to this, and I wanted to see all the results for all test runs that were run on Chrome. If I had multiple of these, I could go through each one and select only the Chrome ones, and then whenever the report is run, you would have all of that data to see specifically for this browser. So that's something that we get questions on a lot, is how can I find out, a specific platform, what's going on with that specific browser, for example, or operating system, or device even. And this would be one of the better ways to do that. You can see the status statistics and find out more about what's happening with that specific platform. But again, here you can just go through, or you can just, let's say you just wanted to do one test run, and this is the one you knew it was. You could certainly do that as well. If, for example, you have a really long project that's been running for a long time, you might not want to include the full list of test runs because it can get quite large. You can always limit this. The default is 25, but you can always limit it to even less, or you could include all if you want to. And as you can see, the caveat here is this may be slow. This could be a lot of data if you've had the project running for several years. And so, take caution. This might take longer to run once you start generating it. If you plan to share this externally via, for example, the HTML or PDF sharing options that I mentioned before, you can also choose to not include any links. And this is good because if you provide those links to external users and they try to click on them, it's going to try to take them to that specific area in TestRail, and it's not going to work for them because they don't have an account to get logged in. So for user experience there, if you want to disable that, you can. And then the access and scheduling section down here, I just want to go over this really quickly. I kind of mentioned some of it already, but if I only want the report to be accessed by myself, it's going to be visible in the private area and only I can access it. Whenever sharing the report, notice that it's not possible for me to click email a link to the report, and that's because if I have this as private, I can't provide the link to anybody else because they won't be able to access it on their end. So you can also switch this to everyone can see it. This will be in the shared section. And now you can see that I can click on this if I wanted to email a link to the report once it's been generated. I can also have it notify myself only if I wanted to, or have those email options that I mentioned previously to email as HTML or PDF attachments in case I want to email these to outside users. Reports can also be scheduled. So currently I have it set to run right now, but if I wanted to, I could also have it run right now and schedule it for example, daily. I can schedule it for 8 a.m. every day if I wanted to, or if you wanted to do multiple times per day, you can just duplicate the report and set the specific times. If you want to run at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, you can just create two separate reports that are scheduled and that they run at those times as needed. If you don't want to generate it right now, you can also just schedule it and do that going forward for whatever time frame. So the access and scheduling section will be visible throughout. It's And if I, for example, click on the details tab, you'll still see these down here, but these options won't change once you've had them selected. So the details tab for this specific report, for summary reports, it's going to show you the sections that are going to be visible throughout the report. Some of these might not be relevant to what you want to get out of the report, so you can disable some of these sections. For example, if you don't want to include all of the tests in the report, you can disable this, but you can still see the overall aggregated statistics for the rest of the data on the report. So this is the most often used feature to disable this, since not a lot of teams like to go through and read every single line of the test or of the report, but you can certainly keep that on if you'd like. And one of the bigger misconceptions that we've seen with report options is that, for example, this activity report here, if I select this time frame, a lot of the times people assume that this is used for the entire report, and that's not the case. This specific time frame or these specific settings on the activity tab are only going to be used for the activity section of the report, and I'll show you the report here in a second, just so you can see what I mean. But this specific section is only governing that portion of the report. That's this report. You can also even disable this if you don't want that to be visible at all on the report. Right now I have it set to default, but you can you can change the time frame, use custom time frame. You can show only specific statuses if you want to know, for example, how many were passed in whatever time frame, or how many were failed during this time frame, etc. And by default, the number of activities to display is 100, but you can also display many more than that. Again, the more you add, the longer the report takes to generate, because it has to go through all of that data. The test tab, this is going to be used to, again, govern only the tests and results section of the report. So that's this section here. And you can choose to have this only show a specific set of tests on the report. You can use any of the filters. These are very similar to the built-in filters throughout TestRail. So you can use estimates, forecasts, priority. Let's say you only want to include the critical tests in this report, or any of these other fields. This also supports custom fields that have multiple value options as well if you added these to TestRail, so you can definitely go through these. This section here, include the following columns. This is what you'll see in that section of the report. So if I added, for example, I want to see all of the defects for this, I can certainly add that column, and it'll show this on an individual test line for each test. Again, limited by default to 100, but you can change that as necessary. So all of these options that I've chosen are the defaults, but again, you could see that there's many different configuration options. Many of the summary reports will have these similar type of options. And the big thing that I want you to get out of it is that each tab here will govern a separate section of the report. So setting a time frame won't adhere to the entire report, but just this section of the report. All right, now I'll go back to this report and show you what it looks like. This is the run summary report. And here, this will be very similar to all of the statistics that we've seen in the dashboard, but specific to the time frame and options that you've configured in the report. So here you'll see the statistics section. You'll see the number of tests passed based on the test run selection. You'll see the pass percentage, the number of untested that are still to be untested. You'll see the list of test runs here that were included within the report. So this is based on either, for this report, it was all test runs, but if you had a custom selection, you'd be able to see the full list of test runs here. And you also see just the test plan if it belongs to a test plan here, and also a milestone if it's linked to a milestone. This percentage here you'll see on the right is going to be the pass percentage for any specific test run or whatever entity you're running the report against. So that's just a list of test runs. And here, this is the activity section of the report. So like I mentioned, the each section is different, and the options for each tab whenever you're configuring the report will govern each section separately. So you'll have this activity report. It's very similar to the activity tab within the dashboards that I mentioned earlier. You'll see the line graph that shows the number of tests executed over time, whatever time frame you chose, broken down by statuses. And then you'll see the actual list of activity that has been done. So this is very similar to the same dashboards that we saw. Whenever looking at the test run, you'll see the assigned activity, the comment activity, as well as any change to the test run, such as a status update. Now this can be very long. Again, we only chose to choose 100 of these activities. Depending on the number of test runs and the size of your project, this can get very large. You'll see down here, though, in this report, if you configured that option, that this only shows the latest 100 activities. There are more test results, but this usually isn't too, I guess, important to view on like an individual action basis, unless you're wanting to specifically look at that. So most teams limit this section anyway. The important part that most teams like to look at is the graph here that shows the actual percentages over time. And then the progress section. This is going to include very similar to the progress tab like I mentioned before. So it's going to have the burn down charts, the remaining tests, remaining effort if you have an accurate forecast available, the ideal progress, again, if you have the forecasting engine or forecasting available. And you'll see here, again, it's got the unknown status because of the sample data generated all at the same time, but you would see whether you have a low accuracy or a high accuracy, and you'd have the numbers here as well. Very similar to the progress tab when looking at a test run, but it aggregates it all, basically including only the details that you wanted to include. So you'll see these different sections. Again, you have the test runs and the forecast if they have forecast available. These don't have forecasts available, but we do have some that have been marked as completed already. Next, we'll have the tests and results section. So this is governed by the tests tab whenever you're configuring your report options. Here you have each individual test and their status. So you'll scroll down, and I think we limited this as well to only 100, but you can actually have every single test if you wanted to. And again, most teams don't really want to review these on a line-by-line basis, but if you wanted to, you can include this section within the report, and it's going to show the statuses of each test. We have this limited to 100, but you can increase that if needed. So I went into depth on the options for this specific report because it's very similar to all the others. Whenever you're viewing a report, you have the options here at the top right to share it, again, via email. You can print the report, so you can use your browser's PDF generation tool to do that, or print it to an actual printer if you want to. You can also download the report. This is going to download it either as the HTML format or the PDF report format in case you want to send that off manually or save that somewhere. And then, of course, you can always create similar if you want. And now I just want to go through, we're getting close on time, so I want to go through some of the other reports just very quickly. Some of the more popular reports. The comparison for cases report. This is good for comparing test cases across multiple test runs and also the statuses. So you'll see a bar graph here. Down here, you'll see the title of each test run underneath each bar. And the rest of the report shows that same theme. It kind of shows a column with each test run as well as the statistics for that specific entity. So you'll see here, I have some status statistics for this specific run, and I can go through and see all of these. Because I included all test runs, you can see that this one's pretty wide. If I had an even larger project, this would be very wide. So this is one of the caveats we mentioned about PDF reports, that if you chose to, let's say you have 50 test runs and you wanted them to all be visible on the report, this would be very difficult to format in a PDF version. So those are some of the things that, this is one of the reports that commonly runs into that issue. Again, if I scroll down here, I see the test runs that are visible or that were selected as part of the report options. And then you have here, again, each test run broken down by column. Here you'll see status statistics, whether they belong to a test plan or milestone. And if you scroll down, this is the true covered comparison coverage section where I can see each individual test case as well as their status over time on every different test run that was selected in the report options. So this one is used quite a bit because you get to see essentially the life of this test case and find out basically what's going on with this test case. Very popular for cases that are failed often, for example, and you want to know how it's looking over time. You can also very quickly see which ones have been untested. So I can see that these have been untested in the most recent test runs, for example. These have been untested each time. Let's remove that from this test run if it's not part of the scope or similar. So that's what this report can be used for. This latest coverage column also shows the most recent result that's been submitted for this test case. So you can also have view here to see which one's the most recent in the latest column. So this is a popular report that we see teams use a lot because it really paints a good picture on the comparison over time for any specific test case. As far as the report options for this one, you only really have the sections and test runs you want to include for this specific report, and the test cases tab is very similar to the test tab. You can include whichever test cases that you want here, either via filter or with any of your custom fields or the fields that are included. And you can also add columns. For example, if I want to see the automation type field or the forecast or estimate just to include within the list, then you can. And then the options here are very similar to the test tab. So getting back to the reports, the property distribution reports, this is popular whenever you want to compare an entity that has multiple options for it, or I guess a field that has multiple options. So this one looks a little bit different. You have a grouping tab here. You can group by various different fields. If I had a custom field that was, for example, a drop-down field and had multiple options, you would also see that here. And most teams want to see the breakdown by status, and so you can group that here. But you can also group any other field that might have multiple like predefined values. You can see an aggregated summary of all the groups or just the details per group, and I'll show you what I mean here in this, or what that means here in a second on the report. Again, you can include the sections and test runs that you want for this report, very similar to the summary report, and most reports will have this option. You can select them manually. You can also use filters or select all of them if you wanted to. And again, this test tab, very similar to all the other reports. You're going to have that test and results section. It's going to be just test after test in the chart if you needed to view that for the specific scope of your report. So we'll go there, property distribution, and you'll see these are the groupings. We chose status, so you'll see test by status. I have 958 passed, this many blocked, this many untested, etc. So you'll see that here. You'll see the percentage. See this broken down by percentage for whatever grouping you chose. If I wanted to see by assignee, I can choose assignee, etc. So this has the option to compare any specific property if it has multiple predefined values, like a status or like an assignee or like any custom drop-down field. Like all reports, it has a list of test runs that were included on this scope. there are 5 more test runs that are not included because this one had set to limit to just 10 test runs, but if I wanted to include more, I could have. And then again, the tests and results section, this shows you all the individual tests that I have selected. And because we limited it, it's gonna let you know if that's been limited and show you that there's more here to that. And so you can go down, and these are grouped again by status, because that's the grouping that we selected. And so you'll go down and be able to see all of that. If you wanted to include all tests, then you can, and it just gives you more list to view there. Let's see, another popular report that I wanted to show before we run out of time is the status tops report. The report options allow you to choose which results, which statuses to display here. So a lot of teams want to see, for example, which test case is failing most often. And you could do that. You can include just the failed status. Our report includes all statuses, so I can show you what that looks like. But if I just wanted to see, which ones have been marked as failed most often and which are the repeat offenders, so to speak, you can use that here. It also gives you the option to choose all test results of the test or just the latest test results. So if I include all test results, let's say I have a test in a test run that was marked as failed, and then maybe marked as retest, and then eventually passed, all of those will be included within this report. If I just want to know the current status of it, then you would choose this option, and it would only show, for example, that last passed result that was entered. Again, sections and test runs, so you can select what you want to have within the report, and then your list of test cases that you want to have visible. I'll show you what this looks like. You have the status counts here, again, always broken down by status statistics here at the top. Test runs, the ones that were included in this report, and then you see the statuses here. So you can see that this test case has been passed 15 times throughout my selection of this report. And it'll show the percentage of times it's been passed compared to all other statuses, and then also the total number of times this is included essentially in a test run. So you'll see this here, but the biggest one people like to use this for is for the failed status. So I'm just going to scroll down here. Each section is very similar. You see the repeat offender here at the top. So if, for example, I had one here that had 20 and the next highest one was 5, there's probably really something wrong with this feature or whatever this test case is designed to test. And so this would be considered a repeat offender. Here, these are all pretty level, so probably everything's pretty normal here, but this could very quickly show you, okay, this test case fails every single time we create a new test run. That there's something there that we need to look into. So the status tops report is very good for finding that information. Again, we don't have time to go through every report. I'd really love to. Maybe we'll add another video similar to this with more reports in the future, and also keep an eye on our blog, because we'll be doing a follow-up blog. If you had questions throughout this, then we'll try to set up some type of FAQ or something similar. But that's all the time I have for going through these reports. I did want to go through some customizations options that you would have to extend TestRail's reporting, either externally or through the built-in reports. Just really quickly to go through this, I wanted to provide the actual article that we have on our documentation hub, which illustrates the options you have for building a custom report. We have the documentation here. You do need a little bit of developer experience, so it kind of lets you know what you would need experience for here within this article. But this essentially allows you to create a custom report and add it to this section here on the right as a report within this list that can be generated within TestRail. So this would be a way that you can build a custom report specifically for your use case, and have it visible within TestRail so that all users can see it and use it, and also view the generated version of it. We typically can't help with the customization of these because every team has a different use case, and we don't have a separate developer resource for this. But if you have the resources for that, you can surely do that. The caveat, though, is that this is only available for the TestRail Server Edition. So this involves adding files to the file system, accessing the database, etc. And because of that, we restrict that on TestRail Cloud for security reasons. But you do have that option for TestRail Server. If this is mission critical for your team to have a very specific report, you can do that with the TestRail Server Edition. Another option that you have for customization is utilizing TestRail's API to generate your own external reports. I've even seen teams use the API to funnel in some reporting into TestRail's UI via TestRail's UI scripts. So that's something that everyone has the ability to do, to add UI scripts to their instance. And you could, for example, use TestRail's API to gather data and add various different details into TestRail via a UI script. Or let's say you have an external tool, you could certainly use TestRail's API to quickly gather data that you need from TestRail and display it in whatever format you need to, whether that's a CSV report, an Excel report, or even if you have your own reporting UI or reporting business intelligence tool, you can take data out of TestRail using TestRail's API and funnel that into whatever external reporting tool that you have for your team. So this is available with both TestRail Cloud and TestRail Server. And we typically recommend going with this option over the custom reports option, but you still have that custom reports option for TestRail Server. So I just wanted to quickly go over these two customization options and options for extending. And of course, we're always accepting feedback and looking into adding report options that have been requested often or that are in more demand. And I'm sure that's something that Simon can also maybe speak to as well. So,
okay, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for doing such a thorough job walking everybody through all of the TestRail reporting options. And yeah, the customization aspects that you were just talking about. I mean, I've been busy trying to respond to folks' questions on the control panel while you've been speaking, and that's certainly something that came up a couple of times. So really useful information there, Marco. Thank you.
Cool.
I don't think we've got time to answer questions on this webinar. We're coming up to the point at which we should be finishing. I've mentioned already, and attendees on the webinar should hopefully have been able to see that we've been answering questions in the console as we've been going along. I've made a note of all of the questions that have been asked, and we will endeavour to follow up on those with a blog post shortly after we've posted the webinar video. I anticipate the video being up tomorrow, and we'll hopefully have like an FAQ follow-up post early on next week. Just to finish off this product webinar, we like to give you a little bit of insight into how the roadmap is shaping up, what we're working on at the moment, and what's in the pipeline for TestRail. So at the moment, we're working on PHP 7.2 support. We're expecting that TestRail is going to run on all 7.x versions of PHP, but in the future we'll be recommending 7.2 as the preferred option, since 7.0 is no longer actively supported by the PHP community, and 7.1 won't be for very much longer either. Please also note that we plan on deprecating PHP 5.6 with the TestRail 6.0 release, which we're expecting to release sort of end of September time this year. In the scope of that release is also single sign-on support, which I've no doubt many of you on the webinar will agree has been a long requested feature. So we'll be enabling you to configure SAML 2.0 SSO configuration with any of the major SSO vendors like Okta, for example. And you'll be able to do that whether you're a cloud or a server customer. And new to cloud, we'll also be enabling customers to configure ADFS and LDAP-based authentication from your cloud instances. And we're also currently scoping out some new features for things like auditing of changes made to the various entities within TestRail, version control on some of those entities, backups, and the ability to kind of take snapshots of projects and things like that. So those are all things that we're working on right now, and that we're planning to release, as I mentioned, towards the end of September. Hopefully, that's not a guaranteed date at this point, but that's what we're aiming for. Looking slightly further out, we're in the planning stages for TestRail 7. That's going to be due sort of early to mid 2019. Stuff that we're looking at for that will include improved test automation support and integrations, things like integration with your continuous integration servers. We'll be making lots of UI and core test management workflow enhancements. So the kind of things we're thinking about there are the ability to be able to reuse test cases and test steps in other tests, other projects, the ability to be able to parameterize your test cases with test data. Again, you know, things that the community has been asking for a little while. And to support some of those changes, we'll certainly be looking at our reporting functionality as well. So after the webinar, there is going to be a survey. I'd encourage you to stay on the line for that. So you can let us know what you think of the current reporting features, and you know, give us some suggestions on things that you would like in order to improve them. I think that's just about it. Stay in touch. Thank you very much again, Marco, for all your hard work walking us through all of those reports. Again, you know, really fascinating stuff and very useful information, I'm sure, for all of the listeners.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm Simon. Reach out to me if you've got product questions, issues, suggestions. Feel free to download our ebook. There's the link, and if you haven't already done so, try TestRail for free via gurok.com customers/TestRail/trial. Thanks very much for attending. We'll see you at the next one, probably towards the end of August, where we'll be talking about test strategy. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.